A month ago, I decided my video for June would be on Shadowverse Worlds Beyond, an upcoming CCG that I had mild interest in. I thought it would make a fun video. I talk about the gameplay and why I like card games, make fun of the cringe anime stuff, but ultimately recommend it because I secretly don't mind cringy stuff. It's a type of video I've made on this channel before, and I have a good time making them. What I didn't anticipate is that Shadowverse was so poorly received by fans that it fell as low as 16% approval on Steam, good for third worst user score in the history of the platform. Terrible launches are always a possibility, but the backlash for this has been far beyond even the modern standard of bad optimization and shit monetization. So this video will be a bit different than I planned. We're going to talk about why the gameplay itself is pretty solid, something even most of the negative reviews agree with, why the insanely low user score is probably undeserved, and why even with the game being overhated, it's insanely predatory and something you shouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Hello, my name is ianbits. I talk about video games. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and consider leaving a comment. I never really played the original Shadowverse. At the time it released, I was playing other card games and I wasn't a fan of the anime art style. Since then, I've gotten significantly more into JRPGs, and while I still don't really watch anime, I don't have the negative predispositions towards the style that I did in the past. More importantly, the options for CCG dorks have dried up quite a lot since 2016. Hearthstone gave up trying to balance things years ago, tons of good smaller CCGs died, and Magic the Gathering has jumped the shark so hard that it's turned into Cloud Strife fighting SpongeBob. I'm far more desperate for a card game these days. So to establish the perspective of this review, again, this is from someone who never really played the original, but I have played way too many digital CCGs. I streamed the Elder Scrolls Legends for years and have jumped around to Hearthstone and a few others as well. None of this is meant to be presented as an expert opinion, nor is it meant to be anything other than a first impression. That's all anyone can really do. It takes months to figure out every nuance of a card game meta, so don't take anything I say as gospel. Shadowverse Worlds Beyond is an oddity in the card game space. You don't often see sequels, they aren't completely unheard of, but you don't usually need to. Card games are almost purely mechanical after all. While the presentation can be cleaned up, you'd expect any overhaul to come in the form of a new standard rotation or upgraded client. I don't know what the situation was with the original Shadowverse, but I do remember it being pretty dated even for 2016, so I imagine it was a technical choice more than anything. As you start the game up, you're sent into this weird uncanny valley sanitized space that was intensely confusing to me, until I realized the bulk of this game's development took place during a time when metaverses were the hot new thing. After a brief tutorial, the game mostly lets you do whatever you want, although it encourages you to go into the previously mentioned metaversal space. I never felt like this was anything more than a glorified menu, but maybe it's for other types of people who really want that Friday Night Magic feeling. Only far more restrictive, as you can't even say the word "is" without getting hit by the profanity filter. No, I'm not joking. In theory, they have some tournaments and shit that will probably happen at some point, and it's at least a somewhat inoffensive presence as you can just do whatever you want from a menu if you really want. I presume it's more of a vessel to sell cosmetics than anything else, and since I don't feel the urge to dress up my somewhat disconcerting child avatar, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. More noticeable is that after the tutorials, one for general mechanics and one short one for each class, there's very little single player content to be found here. There's only one chapter of the main story available, which contains basically just cutscenes and 3 battles against the CPU before you've exhausted it. It's somewhat odd. Usually games prioritize having something at launch to rope in people too anxious to jump straight into ladder, so if you're part of that group, you'll find the onboarding pretty brutal. It's right into PvP you go, despite your inevitably lacking initial collection. Worlds Beyond is a game very similar to Hearthstone in a lot of ways, sort of using it as a template for an online CCG. There's an escalating mana resource that goes from 1 to 10, you alternate turns with no interaction during opposing turns like counterspells, and your goal is to summon creatures and use spells to lower your opponent's health to 0. I see nothing wrong with this. You can do a lot of interesting things by messing with the minutia of the game around that default starting point. One of the things I look for when trying new CCGs is trying to figure out what the core of the game is about. Stripped away from everything else before new cards are introduced that shift metas up drastically, what is the game about and what is the hook to it? In Hearthstone, this was about controlling the board. In Elder Scrolls Legends, it was about field lane control and planning around the rune and prophecy systems. Even Artifact had balancing between the lanes and, at higher levels, manipulating initiative. Most games have something like this, and the ones that didn't were the ones I didn't enjoy enough to play for more than a week or two. Legends of Runeterra is an example of this. I never felt like it was more than a collection of assorted keywords and ideas from other games, although I know people who disagree with me on that. Shadowverse has that with the evolve system, and to be more specific, the core of the game is around big fucking tempo swings. Starting on turn 4, players have access to 2 evolutions per game. This will take any card and transform it into a stronger version with +2 attack and health, as well as give it the rush keyword, allowing it to attack opposing creatures right away. 2 turns after, they'll gain access to 2 super evolutions on top of that. This will increase its stats by 3 instead of 2, and not only give it rush but make it invincible on your turn. The other trick to this is that many cards, in fact I'd say a majority of ones you'll see from the mid-game mana cost, have some bonus written into their card text for either evolving or super evolving that push this tempo swing even farther. An example is this card, which summons another creature when it's played and then 2 more when it's super evolved. It's not uncommon to see massive boards wiped out multiple turns in a row on both sides, as each player throws out their heavy hitters and they trade out. And so the game is about using these tempo swings in one of a few different ways. You can either go back and forth and try to have 1 or 2 evolves left after dealing with all of your opponents, or you can use them to stall to a certain point in the game where you can execute your win condition, usually in the form of creatures that can attack directly the turn they're played. So this core is actually really interesting and has a ton of potential long term, but there are a few inherent issues. One is that it will centralize things around these creatures that get bonuses from evolving and super evolving, which tend to be the rarer and therefore more expensive cards. The other is that it can be frustrating to just constantly see your board cleared every turn, even if you're doing the same thing to the opponent. It's a weird adjustment from stuff like Hearthstone where, at least back when I played it, it was more realistic for early game creatures to stick around. This isn't just in terms of offense either, it inherently makes creatures with taunt less impactful at defending your life total. They're mostly just there to make trades for the opponent awkward. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, more mixed than anything. Some people are just not going to like the style. The game at launch is very heavily based around this mid-range combo hybrid style due to how the base set is designed, and I think control and aggro players might feel frozen out at least until more cards get released. Something that is done really well is distinction between the game's classes. Again, like Hearthstone, cards are divided up into classes with exclusive card pools and mechanics. I can't give super detailed breakdowns because I just haven't gotten the cards to build some of them, but here's a general overview. Swordcraft is token and creature based with a lot of things to flood the board and then some buffs to punish when any creatures stick around for more than 1 turn. They also have an incredibly powerful finisher which when super evolved can deal 12 damage from hand, more than half of the player's starting life total. It's mostly about getting chip with those early creatures, putting out more boards than the enemy has board clears, and finally finishing them off on turn 9 or 10 with charge creatures. Runecraft has a really interesting mechanic called Spell Boost, which will boost the power of specific cards if they're in your hand when you play a spell. It creates some fun decision points when you have to think about whether to cash in a boosted card or keep powering up for later and use something weaker but possibly more awkward to deal with an opponent's board. I haven't had much success with it because I just haven't pulled the finishers, but it's got a lot of interesting potential. Dragoncraft is your standard ramp class with early defensive tools as well as expensive, chunky monsters and finishers in the form of charge creatures. I was lucky enough to pull a lot of the cards for this, and it's fun enough even if it's pretty linear. Portalcraft is the class that's super out there, as it involves creating tokens to fuse together to make mid-sized robots that you can then fuse again into one giant mech that will end the game. I have absolutely no idea how good this is. It seems a bit slow and unwieldy, but you can utilize your mid-game mechs better if you have a certain legendary that I only have one of. Forestcraft is basically this game's version of a rogue from Hearthstone. It makes a lot of 1/1 tokens and gets bonuses for playing a certain number of cards in a turn, with the finisher being this beetle thing that can attack directly right away and gains attack for each card played. It seems really interesting and honestly pretty cheap to build, but I've gotten pretty unlucky and haven't pulled a lot of the lower rarity staples. Abysscraft is the worst class at launch as it's split between a weird aggro strategy it doesn't have enough cards for and a reanimate mechanic that it also doesn't have enough cards for. It's tough to know what this will do until future sets come out. Lastly, there's Havencraft, which uses things called amulets that take up space on the board but aren't creatures and can't be removed. This seems like the dedicated control deck, and watching it looks pretty fun, but it seems to be the most expensive deck in the game as of right now, so I have no hope of playing it. The class is offering a range of playstyles and unique mechanics honestly is one of the best things about the game, and if you want to funnel all your resources into a playstyle you know you'll enjoy, there's probably something here for you. These classes do sort of tie into one of my issues though. Again, this isn't something that's strictly bad, more something that's mixed, and that's the base set and how it seems to be missing a lot of key things. It's in this spot where I think it's really good in terms of long-term potential, but it's created a meta that has too many gaps to start. As I mentioned earlier, the game is heavily focused on this sort of mid-range combo style, and a big part of this is just what the base set is missing. The The big thing is aggro. There's a distinct lack of early game offensive cards or archetypes, in large part because of how there really aren't that many neutral cards. There's a few classes that can put something together, but even they rely a lot on mid-range finishers because of how prevalent and easy it is to clear boards. Having access to rush on demand also combines with another issue, which is how there's a lack of stickiness with boards. Let me explain this with a Hearthstone card called Soul of the Forest. It makes it so any creature on your board summons a 2/2 creature when they die. This means if your opponent clears your board with a spell, something will get summoned to keep the pressure on. This can also be achieved by having other creatures that naturally leave stuff behind or resist board clears, and there really aren't any things like that in the base set of Worlds Beyond. It makes board clears too efficient, makes sticking early creatures too difficult. Part of a natural way to punish combo decks in these sorts of games is through aggression, but your options feel too limited here. Everything is built around mid-range, high-power finishers, and burst from hand. Another issue with the base set is that each class basically has, like, one deck. I don't mean that in the sense that they have one viable deck, I mean there's only really one direction to take them. The set is very synergy focused, and that's good for when the gaps get filled in, but for now that, combined with the poor card acquisition we'll talk about shortly, causes issues. It's tough to really blame them for this though. Base sets are going to be restrictive and synergy focused in basically every game, and they're already planning a quick release of new content to flesh things out. Overall, I think Shadowverse Worlds Beyond has tremendous potential from a gameplay standpoint, and could easily have some fantastic and diverse metas in the future. That is, of course, if you can afford it. So let's visit the real train wreck. I want to sort of qualify things before I go deep into the monetization. During this section, I may sound like I'm defending Shadowverse or Cygames by pointing out favorable comparisons. The point of this will be to provide info for people like me, degenerates who spend too much on CCGs because they love the genre so much. But I want to establish right off the bat, I do not recommend this game. The reason I do not recommend it is because of the monetization. This game objectively costs too much, and just because other card games also cost too much doesn't mean I'm going to tell you to play it. I railed on the Bazaar's monetization a few months ago, and this game is exponentially worse than that was, even ignoring the fact that the Bazaar fixed almost all of its monetization issues and has become a game I strongly recommend. Let's use an example to show what I mean. This is something a lot of other games do, and this example caused me to say out loud a certain 3-word reaction. Packs in this game cost 100 crystals. If you're spending real money, it encourages you to buy 10 at a time. You don't get a discount or anything, but you get a little bonus on top. 10 packs is also the pity for pulling legendary cards. So how do you get the 1000 crystals needed for that? Well, of course the pack sizes are totally awkward, as the closest you can get is 920 crystals for $15.99, which isn't enough, so you need to do the 1400 crystal pack for $23.99. I'm also not even going to touch on the fact that for some reason the bonus crystals you get are counted as unpaid and more restricted, despite the fact that you're, paying for them. But the manipulative pricing actually gets worse than that. As you can see, there's a banner for special deals on crystals by going off-platform to their website. Presumably they want you to do this so Steam or the Play Store doesn't take their cut, and they pass the savings on to you. So let's check that out. Here, the $15.99 pack gives you 990 crystals. This is where that 3-word reaction came in, as without thinking, I just viscerally said out loud, "Oh, fuck off." This sets the stage for Shadowverse. It's not anything that hasn't been done before, it's not anything that pushes the boundaries of shit monetization further or anything like that. It's just a mobile game that does player unfriendly things and wants to manipulate you into spending more than you should. It's the same as so many CCGs and so many gacha games, and I hate it. If you're as efficient as possible with your crystals, by which I mean buying the biggest pack, you get 5,000, the equivalent of 50 packs for $80. Already this is more expensive than most, though admittedly you get more cards in a Shadowverse pack than a Hearthstone pack, but it's still a tremendously tough sell for purely digital cards. For comparison, Hearthstone's biggest bundle offers 60 packs for $70, and MTG Arena offers 100 packs for $100. This means buying a pack with real money in Shadowverse at the highest bundle costs somewhere around 38% more than a pack in Hearthstone and 60% more than MTG Arena. That's not getting into the cosmetics, as buying the pack of characters from the original Shadowverse costs $103 fucking dollars. starters, nor is it getting into the fact that there's a battle pass, because of course there is. So this is already going to be a tough sell just because of how little bang you seem to get for your buck. And it means the stuff you get for free from dailies or logins is going to be extremely important. This is the part where I'm going to sound like a bit of an apologist, because you objectively do get a lot for free, and there's some aspects they do way better than the competition. First is the legendary pity, which is set at 10 packs compared to Hearthstone's 40, and oftentimes you won't even reach that pity. The rates are pretty generous. This is somewhat counteracted by the fact that you need 3 copies of a legendary instead of just 1, but it's a bit of an apples to oranges comparison, and they're not the only card game that allows multiples of the highest rarity. You get a free pack a day, and while that doesn't count towards pity, it's still nice. You also get 3 daily quests, which reward gold you can use to buy packs, at a rate of about 2 packs every 3 days once you account for random keys you get from logging into the inexplicably disturbing metaverse thing. Crucially, these chests and daily missions also reward the crafting currency, and that combined with the daily pack is really going to add up over time. People have done the math on this, and despite people's initial reactions, it's overall not too bad in a vacuum. It's also worth noting that card acquisition in digital CCGs is pretty blanketly terrible. Hearthstone and MTG Arena suck in this regard, and there's absolutely some worse monetization out there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links has an 83% rating on Steam, and that shit is disgusting. Don't play it. Shadowverse doesn't seem to be that much of an outlier here, and while I'm not surprised the reaction was negative, I'm a bit confused as to why it's this negative when other card games seem to get off scot-free. What is bad is that Worlds Beyond has removed 2 key tools in the arsenal of free-to-play and low-spending players. These are the ability to save up and freedom to dust your collection. The fact that the bulk of the rewards comes in the form of the free daily pack means you're somewhat restricted to only the current expansions. If you're free to play and satisfied with your collection and other games, you can start to save up resources for future sets, in order to be able to enjoy them at launch. The way rewards are structured makes that extremely difficult here. You're also unable to disenchant cards in order to craft others until you have a complete playset of that card. Again, this is something that was crucial to a lot of free-to-play players in order to craft meta decks. Disenchanting cards from classes you aren't interested in so you can complete decks from stuff you actually want to play is a huge deal. The reason I find the reception to Shadowverse somewhat odd is that these strike me as the biggest issues, and they're both things that aren't really a problem now, but will be in the future. I think at this very moment, with one set out, the free-to-play experience is fine, but Shadowverse plans on an extremely accelerated release pace. The first new set is coming out only a month after launch, and 3 more sets are planned for this year. They've talked about slowing down after, but it still seems like they're aiming for a set every 2 months, which is just an unreasonable pace for free-to-play players, and even people who are spending, but just not spending that much. This whole thing just strikes me as whale bait, constant meta changes that you need to pay to access and can't save up for. And these aren't the only anti-player things. You might think a daily quest would reset at server time, but instead the counter only starts when the quest has been completed. The game wants to force unnecessary urgency, make you feel like you're missing out if you don't have enough time to refresh it before going to work or whatever. You feel like you're missing out, falling behind, and oh look, there's your credit card. I hate this stuff. I hate that terrible monetization feels so impossibly ingrained into this genre that I genuinely love. And I hate that developers try to push it further at every opportunity. There's too many good games out there to mess around with this. Go play Teamfight Tactics, or The Bazaar, or Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Or hell, Pokemon Showdown even has a lot of the appeal of card games. You can play stuff that's free or cheap that's got a lot of the same hook. I feel comfortable saying keeping up with Shadowverse's release pace is something that is going to be measured in the hundreds of dollars per year. It is unjustifiable. Shadowverse Worlds Beyond is another frustrating reminder that some portions of the game industry are fundamentally broken. There's ideas here that work, people who know what they're doing designing core mechanics and set design, and it's all wasted. Expecting people to pay hundreds yearly for a single digital CCG is an outdated concept. There's simply too many good alternatives. What could have been an interesting new option for card game players is just another game designed to subsist off the 1% of players that get addicted enough to spend irresponsible amounts of money. It's not the first time, it won't be the last, but it's still a goddamn shame. Thanks for watching. I don't have a Patreon or anything, but if you enjoyed the video, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. I'm shelving the Xenoblade videos for a while until I figure out how to approach them. I may end up doing just Xenoblade 3, but I'm not sure.